Hello, good afternoon. All right,
Hello.
so nice to have you guys. Getting the names down, and as usual, and so we're covering the Constitution today, right? And so if you've noticed, the format of the assignment is not argumentative as usual. It's a little different in that I simply ask you to put things into categories. We'll look over the precise assignment very soon here. Let's see here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Oh, one more. All right. Let's see here. Let's take a look at the assignment itself. So I have here, okay, to the Constitution, assignment number 6. Please make 3 lists or categories: enlightened, conservative, and pragmatic. And please cite at least 4 examples of each. Let's see here, 4 enlightened facets to the Constitution, 4 conservative ones, and 4 pragmatic ones from the subsequently presented Constitution of the U.S. Make sure that at least 1 section from Article 1, 1 section from Article 2, and 1 section from Article 3 is present in one of the 3 categories. So you don't have to, they don't have to all be represented in all 3. So let's see here, enlightened. What do I have here is my subjective definition roughly for enlightened. Any element to this Constitution that is ostensibly designed to prevent tyranny. This includes methods of checks and balances of one branch of the government over another. Any measure intended to ensure transparency or accountability of officials to the people or others. Limitations to discretionary powers of rulers. Any powers vested in the most democratically elected body, which is the House of Reps, right, initially. A blatant example of this is the Bill of Rights, ensuring citizens' basic rights and freedom. All right. So we'll get back to this if you have any questions. Conservative, any element to this Constitution that seems to conserve early modern or even older, medieval, etc., notions, like the following: power vested in a better sort or an elite body entrusted to use its own discretion without much accountability to the governed. Power centralized in a strong central government agency as like a unitary government, as opposed to deliberately weakened and decentralized as desired by the libertarians of the late 18th century. Limited democracy, ruled by the demos or the common people, a strong executive or military resources that can curtail or cut short individual freedoms in the name of order and stability. An example of this is that only 1/2 of one branch of the 3 originally consisted of popularly elected officials, and only by those granted citizenship status. All right. So that is what I term as conservative. And then pragmatic is inherently amoral, right? It doesn't worry about morality necessarily. It's practical. It's intended to bring about practical results. Inherently amoral, simply designed for expediency as a compromise between disparate factions, right? Or designed to address exigencies that may arise in the future. An example of this, sadly, may be the tacit acceptance of slavery to placate the planter faction of the South and ensure their ratification of the document. All right. So if you guys have a chance, if you want to take a look at your textbook, at the end of the textbook, you have the Constitution. If you wanted to take a quick look at that, what I'm going to do now at this point is I'm going to share with another document. I'm going to share with this PowerPoint instead. Okay. So let's see here. So I'm looking at the preamble and then the first article, the second and the third article, et cetera, right? And just I'm going to do this a little bit briefly. I don't want to be too exhaustive because it might be redundant. You might be fully aware of what I'm asking of you. So matter of fact, I'm going to jump right to Article 1. So when you look at Article 1, right, what are some things that you notice in the back of your book that might be, ostensibly enlightened? Well, for one, House of Reps are elected, and they're elected every second year. So that holds accountability relatively well, at least theoretically, right? That you're only running for 2 years. You only have 2 years to show your merit, and then you have to run for reelection. So that shows some sense of accountability. The House of Reps being chosen every other year, arguably. The fact that they have power of impeachment, right, to impeach the president, et cetera, for high crimes, misdemeanors, et cetera. That constitutes an enlightened facet to the House of Reps, arguably. And the fact that they can override the president's veto with a 2/3 majority, right? As an example of checks and balances, might be an example. So see what I have here. Sections 1 through 3. Laws require a majority by two-branch legislator, one elected, the other elected by state reps. So is that enlightened in the sense of Montesquieu's writings of checks and balances, right? House reps elected for only 2 years, must be an inhabitant of the state that you're representing. So direct representation, right? Senators also must be inhabitants of their states, and they have the power to try impeachments. Congress must assemble once per year. It says from time to time, they ought to keep a journal of their proceedings and publish such for their constituents to be able to read. So a sense of accountability and transparency, right? They shall not attain to an additional office, right? And with a 2/3 majority, supermajority, they could override the president's veto. They're not to accept any title of nobility from another country. They're not to accept an office from another branch of the government, so that they would have a conflict of interest of some sort, right? So those are all in there. Each state is to be guaranteed. Well, let's get on with that later. Let's see here. So what about conservative, however, right? Notice when it mentions the House reps and it talks about representation, you're looking at section 2, the third paragraph, says representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. So, wow, there's obviously no sense of direct universal representation, citizenship, right? Clearly, they're differentiating free persons from Native Americans who are unassimilated, even though they're in the same category to be counted, they're differentiated from indentured servants, and they're clearly differentiated from 3/5 of all other persons. And we all know what that's referring to, right? The 3/5 clause, that a slave is to be considered 3/5 of a person in the remuneration of concerning taxation and representation to determine how many reps are elected in the House by population. Because remember, it says it shall not exceed one for every 30,000. One voice for every 30,000 civilians. That's pretty conservative, right? So yeah, they're differentiating Native Americans, they're differentiating slaves, certainly no universal citizenship. So that arguably would be considered conservative, but also you might consider pragmatic, in that it was a practical, amoral, concession, because they didn't want the unnerving polarization that would happen in determining who could be a citizen and who couldn't. They just let each state decide for itself, right? They didn't take that tiger on. And so you might consider it actually pragmatic. And so that's what's interesting to me is in some cases, when I look at your list, it's not what I would initially thought in some cases, right? Where I thought, oh, okay, they're putting this clause of the Constitution under conservative. I kind of personally consider that pragmatic or vice versa. That's why I ask, just for my, intellectual curiosity, just if you would add a sentence or two, no more than that, but just a sentence or two as to why you put it under the category that you did. All right.
Is this PowerPoint posted on Canvas?
You know what? I don't think I put the PowerPoint on, and I apologize.
Oh, okay.
I will rectify that.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. So yeah, I'll be doing that soon. All right. So notice, right? Senators were not directly elected, not yet, not to the 17th Amendment, much later on in the early 19 teens. And so senators were chosen by their state legislators. And notice it says from time to time they shall print the log of the of Congress of what is being spoken and who's voting for what, except in times of their judgment that may require secrecy. So that's kind of a huge caveat, a huge condition to that clause, right? Where they can require secrecy. So a 20-year gag rule on slavery. You find that on section 9. Says the migration or importation of such persons. You like how they're very vague about it, right? They won't overtly state slaves. As any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit, shall not be prohibited by Congress prior to the year 1808. So let's see here. What else do we have? We have some examples of pragmatic. Article 1, Section 8. If you take a look at Article 1, Section 8, some people might consider this conservative, actually, because it's giving a lot of power to the federal government as opposed to the states. And then some people would consider it pragmatic, and that these are practical issues that a country will have to address. And so hence, it's a practical necessity. So notice, right? Shall have power to lay and collect taxes, pay debts, provide for the common defense and general welfare of the U.S., borrow money, regulate trade with foreign countries and among the states and with the native tribes, establish a uniform rule on naturalization with immigration, bankruptcies, coinage of money, standards of weights and measures, counterfeiting, a post office, promote the progress of science and useful arts, tribunals of an inferior nature to the Supreme Court, punish piracies and felonies on the high seas, declare war, raise an army, maintain a navy, and suppress insurrections, and the list goes on. But notice the bottom one. At the bottom of this, this arguably could be considered pragmatic, and you could defend that in a sentence or two, or it could be considered very conservative. Is notice at the bottom, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing enumerated powers that were specified before that. So, right, they're giving themselves a blank check for the future, saying, oh, and by the way, Congress has power to do this, because some people actually would even go so far as to say that it was enlightened to have Article 1, Section 8, because it specifies a list. And therefore, if it's not on that list, then the federal government cannot and ought not to do it, right? Although we've kind of have evolved in our political tradition away from that libertarian view of it, to be honest. Some could perhaps subjectively make that argument, and so contend that, hey, with Article 1, Section 8, it's enumerated, they are specified. So therefore, if it's not specifically on that list, you can't do it. But the grand exception to that libertarian view of Article 1, Section 8 is the necessary proper clause, right? Saying, oh, and by the way, in addition to these specified powers, Congress in the future can do whatever is necessary and proper to carry out one of those specified responsibilities. Okay, so just something to think about. And then Section 10, no state shall enter a treaty, alliance. It can't coin money. It can't, engage in quite a few things that a confederacy could do. So notice, right, with Article 1, Section 10, the states are not as powerful now. We have something closer to a unitary government, a strong central government with power over the states, arguably. All right. Enlightened with Article 2, mentioning the president. It's up to you what you might decide as far as the electoral college. Some people consider it conservative because it's not popular election. Some people consider it pragmatic in a very intricate, kind of complex way. It's still confusing to me to this day, the electoral college system. The fact that, is it practical that the president has to be 35 years old, has to have been a resident for 14 years, has to have been a natural born citizen of the country? Is that all practical? Is that conservative? It's up to you. And please give me a sentence or two arguing your position. Before he or
Mr.
she,
Cowell,
yes.
these articles that need to be in our assignment, they're located in our books.
They are, and they're also located on the assignment itself. I just copied and pasted it. So it's just the original copy of the Constitution, right?
Oh, and those are
so
so we need to put examples from each article.
Yeah, I
Up
want
to
at
3.
least I want at least something mentioned from Article 1 about the legislator, Article 2 about the presidency, the executive, and Article 3 about the Supreme Court. Have something from each of those 3 articles in at least one of the 3 categories.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't need to be in all 3 categories.
Exactly. Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, no problem. I'm trying to balance by, making this at least a little bit intellectually, respectable, but being fairly easy. I didn't want it to be that exacting as far as your time and all of that. And so, yeah, you don't have to have something in all 3 from each of the 3 articles, just in at least one from each of the 3 first articles. Okay. But the fact
do you want us to cite, sorry,
no,
do you
go
want
ahead.
us to cite those articles as well when we do put it in, so that you know that we have it? Oh, okay.
Yes,
Got it.
please. So let's take a look. Let's take a look back at the assignment itself again. So yeah, notice what I put here, right? Under enlightened, Article 1, Section 2, Article 1, Section 5, Article 2, Section 1, Article 4, Section 4. So yeah, and then notice I describe what it is, what that section is about, and I give just like a sentence explanation as to why it is conservative, pragmatic, or enlightened, in my estimation.
And you would want, we can use your examples, or?
No, I'd like you to go independent of this. And I know I run the risk because my power of memorization is not that strong. And so I know I'm running the risk of people doing that. But and obviously I would almost expect it to dovetail a little bit with mine, in the sense that at least one, likely have one in each category, the same as me. But no, I'd like to think I try to memorize my examples well enough that I don't want you to just obviously just copy mine.
Yeah,
I know
because I
I'm
see
running
on
that risk.
because I see on conservative, the number 4, you put give one more example. So that's why I was a little confused there.
Yeah, Yeah, so sorry about that. And like I said, at first I didn't give any examples at all myself. I gave just my subjective definition to all three categories. And that's about as far as I went. And I just had several, because it's a different format from my regularly, portioned argumentative write-ups that I normally give to you guys. And so
Mhm.
in the past, I've had quite a few requests and even complaints that they're not certain as to what I'm expecting of them, etc. So I ran the risk of being taken advantage of and being much more explicit so that no one could say that I didn't make it clear what I'm asking you to do. Okay. So does anybody have any questions as far, I mean, just that? And I don't mean to make you feel foolish for having a question and just stating, that I've made it pretty clear because perhaps I haven't. Are there any questions as far as what I'm asking, what my subjective take is on enlightened, conservative, or pragmatic as a category, as a definition? So do you guys feel okay on doing this assignment from what I've covered and examples I've given?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay, good, good. All right. So yeah, if you should have any other questions, go ahead and give me contact me via a Canvas message, or even in the case of emergency, the cell phone number that I offer. But yeah, that's about it for today. I know you guys can do this well.
Can I talk to you for just one
Of
moment
course,
after we are done?
of course, Mr. Virag.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so if you don't have any other questions, you guys, I have your names down, and you'll get your extra credit on the Constitution assignment, and I'll bid you adieu and see you on Thursday. Okay, so
I
thank
actually have
you.
one more question. I'm sorry, Mr. Cowell.
No, don't be sorry.
I
What's
just
that?
want to make sure I do this right. So in the copy of the United States Constitution all the way at the bottom, when you put when you have the Article 1 and the sections, are those like examples, or like we can choose from those what's conservative and what's enlightened and
Those are examples. Yeah, those are examples.
we can't use those?
I don't want you to use them verbatim. Like I said,
Got it.
I'll have them basically memorized of what I have put. And I definitely don't want to see the same list of 4, you know what I mean? And with your own sentence, I want you to use the latitude of explaining it in your own language. And of course, not copying what I had written. So like I said, I know I run the risk of that possibility happening. But like I said, I wanted to err on the side of giving too much information rather than too little.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so Mr. Virag, I don't know if you wanted to wait a little bit longer until people get off, or if you feel
Oh,
okay.
it's really not that that much. So the problem is that I won't be home until the 1st, and this assignment is due on the 1st. Can I get a date?
Of course. Yes.
Yes.
So
Can you give me
I this is what I have that provision in my syllabus for, is for exemplary students like yourself who come faithfully, and then you have an anomalous occasion in which you have, a family outing or some type of emergency. That's exactly why I have that provision in my syllabus. And so I'd be happy to grant you an exception on the due date for this assignment.
Thank you. It's because I am pretty slow at reading it as well,
Well, that's, if
And
you are, that's
that's why.
understandable as your second language.
Yeah, and it's a little ambiguous sometimes, and I need help. I do ask my husband all the time on this.
Uh-huh.
He does help me, but
Oh,
I do
good.
need some time with this a little more. Thank you.
No, no problem. So yeah, you have been turning in things on time. You've been coming consistently to the meetings. And so I feel more than comfortable in granting you an exception, and take the time you need to turn this one in.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, then that was all. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Have a good one, Mr. Durock.
You too. Thank you.
All right. So Alonda, I noticed you just came in.
No, I'm like, did I miss the meeting? Because I just got out of my psych class. So
No problem. That's understandable. So basically what we're doing, Alonda, is that I'm asking you to put things in one of three categories: enlightened, conservative, or pragmatic, and then just take sections from the Constitution and use at least 4 into each of the 3 categories. At least 4 sections into each one. So, and I have definitions for my subjective definitions for the 3 of them. So enlightened, anything to prevent tyranny, anything involving checks and balances, anything demanding transparency, accountability, I would put under enlightened. Conservative is that technically you're conserving something that historically has long been a traditional norm. So centralized power in a central government entity rather than state power or regional power. Centralized power, I think, is an example of conservative. An institution as old as slavery, would be an example. And anything that is undemocratic, coming from the early modern and medieval and prior to that, fall of Rome time period. Anything that is rather undemocratic, I would say arguably is conservative. And so conserves the old traditional norms. Pragmatic is that you're looking at something that is not necessarily, it's amoral. You're not thinking about right or wrong. You're not thinking about even tyranny versus freedom and that more modern paradigm, but you're thinking simply in terms of practicality. What will bring about a practical result, right? So any type of compromise could be termed as pragmatic. Sadly, even slavery could be seen as an amoral compromise, right? I also gave it as an example, and it's arguable because you could disagree with me, but I also mentioned Article 1, Section 8 on Congress, and it gives a long list of what Congress can do. Borrow money, raise an army, regulate interstate trade, issue standards, weights and measures, coin money, declare war, etc. So those might be perhaps examples of pragmatism seen in the Constitution. And I know I run the risk of you guys just copying what I put down, but I'd like to think that I have it in my head down well enough that if someone were to put it down verbatim, I would not give that person credit for the assignment.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, so on the assignment, are there these directions basically, but maybe a little less than what you just said?
Yeah, I mean, just really, I think I was as verbose about my instructions in writing as I just was verbally with you.
Oh,
I like
okay.
to think so. And so, and I understand that your answers will perhaps dovetail with mine to a certain extent. And I also ask that after you give your example, give just 1, 2 tops, but just 1 to 2 sentence explanation as to why you think it's enlightened or conservative or pragmatic.
Okay.
Okay. Because sometimes I will, there is subjectivity involved in this. Sometimes, especially with the categories of conservative and pragmatic, I have found in my experience. that I've thought of something as conservative and a student thought of it as pragmatic, or vice versa. And then I like reading their explanation, and it helps me learn something where I think, okay, I've gained some perspective on that clause. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm good. Sorry that I was
No,
late.
don't be sorry. It's not your fault. And you're another faithful student coming to class. And so I have no problem with you coming late under those circumstances. You're doing the best you can.
Yeah, I tried to, because these are some of them are my dark classes or whatever. And I tried to tell them at the beginning, I'm like, you have some of our classes like overrunning each other. Oh, we'll take care of it. Yeah, it didn't happen. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, and then we still have class Thursday.
Yes. Yeah, every now and then we will get rather far ahead of schedule. And so I'll end up canceling like the one of the 2 weekly Zooms, because I don't want to get too far ahead. That's just the risk we run as far as, the pace of the class. You guys being a late start class, the average number of days, it doesn't turn into a neat number average wise. So that if we would have done 1 Zoom a week, it would not have been nearly efficient enough. But doing 2 Zooms a week is a little bit excessive, is a little bit more than necessary.
Yeah, see, and I wished I would have understood what late start meant, because this is my first, I didn't understand. I wished I would have taken your class at a slower pace.
No, well, it's all right. I tell you what, though, under the circumstances and looking at your work, what little I've graded so far, you're doing great. So you're
good. That makes me feel a little better. I was a little worried.
But I agree that you would have had, just by the nature of the schedule, you would have had less anxiety taking the regular course class.
Well, yeah, and I feel like I would have gotten more out of it. I would like to have gotten more out of the class. So that was my main thing, because I didn't realize what late start meant. I know now, and won't make that again. So anyway. All right. Well, thank you very much for continuing to stay on and giving me those instructions.
You're very welcome. All right. So good luck with this. Okay. And in the event of us getting to that point at which I feel a need to slow down and cancel a Zoom class, I will let everyone know by way of an announcement.
Oh, okay, cool. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome, Alonda. Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right. And so, Kaleo, Michael, anyone else? Can I help you? Are you okay? Yeah, Kaleo.
You haven't graded the assignment from the 10th
From the 10th
of October.
Okay, so I got to play catch up. Yeah, I definitely got to play catch up. I have to look. I'm teaching, a few classes at 2 different schools. So I try to be fair in that I'm almost indiscriminate as far as which class I start with on a given day when I try to catch up on my grading. And so I'll make a note of your guys's late start class. Perhaps you guys are due to be next for me to do a couple assignments and try to play catch up.
Okay, and as for this assignment, there's 3 categories: of conservative, pragmatic, and enlightenment. But you want us to have us list 4 articles, and there's three.
I want you to give 4 examples under all 3 categories. Yeah, so just 4 examples under each of the 3 categories, so that the numbers don't have to coalesce. You know what I mean? So give me 4 examples of enlightened sections to the Constitution, 4 examples of conservative sections of the Constitution, and 4 pragmatic sections to the Constitution.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
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 That was my question initially too, what I was going to ask. Okay, that clears.
Good.
Perfect.
All right. Well, good, you guys.
And are you teaching next semester?
I'm sorry?
Are you teaching next semester?
I am.
the second half?
Oh gosh, you know what? Let me get back to you on that. Because to be honest, I know that they always give me usually one of each. And I look to just see how many classes they've given me between 1 and 3 at each of my 2 schools. And I don't have memorized, I don't recall precisely if at your school I have the latter half or not in the spring. But that makes me curious myself. So when we're done with the meeting, I'll take a look. I'd like to take a look at it myself and see. And so feel free to ask me again or Canvas message me, and I'll be happy to answer that. Because
Okay,
if I do have the latter half, I'd love to have you again.
okay. Thank you. That's all I
You're-
got.
You're
Thank you,
very
Professor.
welcome. All right, Mr. Villa, you doing okay as well?
Oh, yes, you answered the questions already that you just asked
Perfect.
recently.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, you guys have a nice day, okay?
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.